That we'll do a quick review of the National Airspace System. Why do we have a National Airspace System? Well, the primary reason is obviously for safety, but it's to keep manned aircraft or crewed aircraft from bumping into each other, and also to make airports more efficient by sequencing aircraft into these terminal areas efficiently and safely, of course. As the drone industry develops, there will be time to time a need for us to enter controlled airspace. So the FAA wants us to be aware of it and why there is a national airspace system and why there is controlled airspace. Also want us to know, drone pilots specifically, to know how to avoid it, or if we do have to enter it, what we need to do that. Okay, so controlled airspace, that's a basic term that we use. There's two categories. The official word is these categories are regulatory or non-regulatory airspace areas. Class A, B, C, D, and E are warning areas, alert areas, and controlled firing areas are regulatory, otherwise known as controlled airspace. We like to use controlled airspace as a term because it helps us to understand that we need some kind of permission because someone's controlling that airspace. It's their airspace. We may enter it with permission. Without permission, we may not enter it. Okay, so let's go through all. And then the other class is Class G. Class G is referred to as uncontrolled, basically. Non-regulatory. You don't need permission. We're free to fly on those areas. Although there are some of these areas that include airports, uncontrolled airports, where crewed aircraft, manned aircraft will communicate to each other so that they can self-sequence into and out of airports without bumping into each other, basically. So since we have to avoid all air traffic, manned aircraft, then it would be really helpful if we knew where they were and what they were doing, so we could avoid them, right? So that's the encouragement for us, is we should be trying to monitor manned aircraft traffic, even though we're free to fly in G without permission, basically. Okay. So how do we know where that is? One way is to look at the chart supplement US. There's a copy, a picture, or sort of a copy of one of them. Remember that the chart supplement US has way more information about an airport than you would probably ever want to know. Stuff like the airport manager's phone number, stuff like that. Lighting, all kinds of things like that. That's one way to do it. But a better way is just to look at the sectional chart. Here is a aeronautical chart. Legend. Trying to select the color. Okay, here's the Legend. It's on the edge of all sectional charts. But remember, of course, that sectional charts do expire, so we want to make sure we have a current one. But anyway, here's a copy of one. So first thing we might want to look at is this section here for airports. And we notice on the left side there's magenta colored airports. On the right side it's blue colored airports. What's the difference? Well, magenta basically indicates an uncontrolled, or an airport where pilots are talking to each other, but there is no one controlling the airspace in and out of that airport. The blue is controlled control towered airports. Basically, that there is an air traffic controller that is controlling and sequencing traffic in and out of the airport. So that gives us the basic thing. So we look at a chart and we see a blue airport, we know it's controlled airport. It's a magenta airport, it's not controlled airport. Okay, but the second thing, since we're talking about the National Airspace System, is over on this side, airport traffic service. Okay, so now we have these different indication. We have the solid blue, which is Class B airspace, solid magenta, which is Class C, dashed blue, which is Class D, and then dashed magenta, which is Class E. And then we have this little shaded area, which is Class E above 700 feet on the shady side, and on the darker side it's above 1200 feet and above on the shady side. And it could be magenta, it could be blue. And backing up to Class E dashed line, that's Class E surface up. Okay, we'll look at some examples. But first, here's the memory tool that might help you to understand these. There's A is that high altitude, 1,800,000 feet above. Goodness, we're not going to, that won't be on any test question, and we really don't need to concern ourselves about that. B for big airports, C for crowded airports, D for dialogue, airports that are medium-sized but still controlled airspace. These are controlled airspace indications. E is everywhere else that's controlled, and G is uncontrolled. So here's an example of B airspace. It's the blue, solid blue. What the purpose here is that they're trying to get traffic, manned aircraft in and out of this airport, which is the one in the center, Dallas-Fort Worth. They're trying to protect the airspace so that they won't be running into, well, other air traffic, including drones. So they've segmented it off into like an upside down wedding cake kind of thing. You saw the picture at the very beginning. Let's see. Right, there's this would be, all right, let me just do a little drawing here. That's the Earth, and there's the airport. Let's just say that's the airport right there. And so while they want to protect all this airspace here from the surface up, they want to protect it. But then they have these sections here. Wow, my drawing is pretty lousy. And then there may be more than one layer, or there might only be one layer, and then it goes up. But up here, they don't really care about controlling that either. So in this particular situation, it's 11,000 feet is the top. The bottom is around the airport surface. They want to protect that airspace because airplanes are flying in like this. This guy's coming in, he's descending, and he's descending, and then he does, and then he lands. Okay, so he's not way down here low. He's up there higher and coming on down. So they don't need to protect that airspace. Okay. So there's a shelf area here. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, there's one here at 4,000 feet. That'd be this one right here. And the top is 11,000 feet. So that's how they indicate that, by putting a top/bottom. That's Class B, so that's how they indicate it. Okay, there's other airspace underneath there, so we'll get back to that in a second. Moving right along, that's Class B. Class C is crowded, solid magenta, so we're looking at this area right here, which is, wow, I have to get really close to read what that says. Doesn't matter. Same kind of thing, except it's typically only, let's see, Earth. Let's see if I can't draw better lines. Airport. Usually it only has one shelf area. And it typically goes up to maybe 4,000 feet. So SFC, 4,000 feet. The shelf area is, yeah, I can't read it, but looks like 3,000 feet maybe. Typically it's a somewhat smaller, it's a smaller airport. It's not a small airport, but a smaller airport. They just need to protect the airspace, again, for people coming in and out of there. Okay, that's how it's indicated. Then we have dashed blue. Okay, now this is a little trickier because, again, we're back on we're back on the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but dash blue, it's the area 1 there. That's, let's see if I can draw that. Yeah, that's that dash blue around Denton Airport. Now this is just a solid column. Just goes up. Earth. I'm probably making too big a deal of this, but it just goes up. There's no shelf area. It just goes up. And you can see, so it's surface. So all they need to put to tell you about this is, all they need to do is list the top of it. So they do. There's 2,500 feet. So that little 25 just means the top of this is 2,500 feet. So it's just a cone, and typically 4 miles from the center of the airport around. Okay, that's D. Okay, E, there's 2 kinds of E. There's surface E, which is, you can see it right there by the number 1, magenta, dashed magenta, that's surface. So from the surface up to whatever's above it. It could be all the way up to A airspace. Everything above that, from the surface up, is controlled airspace. But that's again to protect people coming in and out of Minot International. But more typically, you're going to see this kind of thing, where it's a shaded area. So outside the shaded area, it's E airspace starts at 1,200 feet, but inside it starts at 700 feet. For the same reason, they're trying to protect people doing instrument approaches, manned aircraft, not people, but manned aircraft going in and out of that airport, somewhat protect them. So it's controlled airspace above 700 feet around that airport and above 1,200 feet there. Again, you're saying, well, we can only fly to 400 feet. Yes. However, there may be a tower within that airspace that goes up to 500 feet, and you've got permission to fly 400 feet above it, right? To do an inspection. That would put you into controlled airspace. You couldn't do that. You'd still have to stay, from 5, you could only go 200 feet above that tower to stay out of controlled airspace. Right? Makes sense. Okay, so I'm beating this to death. It's taking way too long to do this video, but okay, so there again, there's a memory tool. Cool. This, it may be handy for you. Might want to take a picture of it with your phone, because it lists the airspace, and then whether you need permission, and then the map symbol, right? But the map symbol, you're always going to have the, if you have a chart, which you ought to have, even electronically or paper, doesn't matter. If it's paper, though, you got to make sure it's up to date. And on the legend, it will give you the same information. So, okay, now there's other kinds of airspace that are regulatory. Let's see, special use airspaces, prohibited. Typically a blue hatch line and says P and dash and a number. Can't fly in those areas. Restricted area, again, it has an R dash with a number, 4-digit, 3-digit number. And there, if it's active, or they say hot, you're not allowed to go in through there. But sometimes on the edge of the chart, if you look under R dash and the number, it will tell you the hours when it's not active. The military isn't always flying every day all the time. Or it may say call for permission. It might have a contact number that you might call to get permission to fly during those times. National security areas, you can fly in there. Warning areas, MOAs, alert areas, yeah, and there's the legend, what it looks like, and yeah, you can fly in there. Military training was, yeah, you can fly in there. Air defense zone, that's the border, the U.S. border, so they don't want you to fly in there. Temporary flight restrictions, no, you can never fly in a temporary flight restriction. That is not on a chart, so you've got to call 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF or go to www.tfr.faa.gov to find out about those